I want to talk about learning 10 languages at the same time. And so, personally, I study 10 languages at the same time. And I study 8 of them every day, and then 2 of them maybe 3 to 5 times a week. But those languages are Spanish, German, Japanese, Mandarin, Chinese, Teochew, which is a Chinese dialect, Korean, Sanskrit, Arabic, and those are the 8 languages I study every day. And then the last 2 are French and Italian. So I don't study those every day, but I do study them maybe 3 to 5 times a week. So this video is going to be about studying languages sequentially versus simultaneously. Now, I've already told you I study all my languages simultaneously, and I believe that's really the way to go. However, is there an exception? Is there a reversal to this? And yeah, of course, there's always an exception. There's always a reversal. For example, if you look up George Schmidt, he was a translator and interpreter for the UN. And he learned at least 1 language a year since he was 10 years old. And apparently on his 53rd birthday, he held an interview where he demonstrated various degrees of proficiency in 53 languages. So on his 53rd birthday, he was able to speak in 53 languages, apparently. And he did this by learning them 1 at a time, 1 roughly a year. So he's an example of learning sequentially and being successful at it. Now, why do I say you should learn it simultaneously then? Well, I remember when I lived in Japan some years ago, there were a lot of other foreigners studying Japanese, and some of them took it so seriously. They wanted to learn Japanese so badly that what they did was they cut English entirely out of their lives. They were native English speakers, usually from America, and so they just cut out everything in English. They didn't watch English shows. They didn't really speak in English to people. They must have changed their phone to Japanese. They did everything they could so that they just focused on Japanese every day. And what they told me was after a long enough time, maybe a year or more, they found that it actually became difficult to speak English. And when they went back to America after having spoken only Japanese for, a year or many years, they found it difficult to recall the words in English to be able to speak in English. And I found that interesting. And it goes to show that even with your native language, if you do not use it, it will begin to decay. Now, of course, there is that exception of George Schmidt, but I think for most people, this is true. If you do not use the language, it will begin to decay. So if that's true for your native language that you may have been speaking for 20 plus years, it's certainly true for a foreign language that you may have learned for only 1 or 2 years. And so basically what this means is if you want to speak, say, half a dozen languages, let's say 6, then you're going to have to figure out a way to upkeep them at some points. You're going to have to figure out a way to be able to study or use all 6 of them at one time, or else they're going to decay and you won't be able to use them as well. So based on that logic, it makes sense that you should begin juggling them as soon as possible to begin to train the skill of being able to juggle multiple languages at the same time and to bring multiple languages into your life at the same time and be able to use them. So some of the common arguments that I hear against this practice is if you study 6 languages at the same time, you're not going to advance very quickly in any one of them. For example, if you took the time and put it only into 1 language, you'll make a lot more progress with that 1 language than if you split up the time among 6 languages. And that makes sense to a degree. However, in practice, I do know that at the Language Academy, I've seen several students now, and I remember one in particular He was going to do a homestay program in a country in Africa where they speak Arabic. And so he was very excited about getting the opportunity to do a homestay in Arabic and to improve his Arabic and learn Arabic. So what he said to himself was, okay, since I'm going to be going to this country next month, I'm just going to focus only on studying Arabic, and I'm going to put all my other languages like German, Italian, or whatever else he was studying, I'm going to put those on pause, and I'm just going to study Arabic. And when he did this, something very interesting happened. He found that the amount of time he spent studying Arabic when he only studied Arabic was actually lower than the amount of time he spent studying Arabic when he also had several other languages he was studying at the same time. Now, isn't that interesting? You would think if you only focused on one language, you would put more time into it than if you had multiple languages you were studying. But in practice, he found that was the opposite. He spent less time on Arabic when he focused solely on Arabic. And we think the reason for that is because you take the joy out of language learning when you begin to force yourself to just focus on the one language. And when you take the joy out of it, obviously you don't want to do it. And so you begin to spend less time on it. Another argument is that you may not, if you do all the languages now, then if you do them sequentially, my argument is that if you do them now, at least you get to them in your life. Because if you do them sequentially, you may get through the first three, and then the last three you may never get to. And that would be a shame. If you really do want to learn these 6 languages, you should just do it now. Because all we have is now. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed. And I've said this before. You might not get 5 years from now. You might not get next year. You might not even get tomorrow. So if these languages really are languages that you want to engage in with your life, you should be doing it today. So another argument is that won't you get confused when you study multiple languages, especially if they're very similar to each other? And I think actually it's easier to study similar languages at the same time when you're able to put them side by side to compare the differences. I think if you study them without being able to compare them side by side, it does get tricky in order to remember which is which. But if you have some good example sentences or texts from the same company that have different languages, and you can put them next to each other and say, okay, this is what Spanish looks like, this is what Italian looks like, this is what Portuguese looks like, that makes it easier to keep it separated in your minds. And actually, next month, I'm going to be coming out with a book that teaches you how to learn Swedish, Norwegian, and Danish at the same time. So be on the lookout for that if you're into Scandinavian languages. Anyway, to get back more onto me, how do I study 10 languages at the same time? So the way I do it is I do it by 15-minute sessions, which means that I set a timer on my phone for 15 minutes and then I just study and focus for 15 minutes. And when the timer goes off, I either take a break or I do something else. I either work. If I have other tasks, I do them. Or I just go on to another 15-minute block of language study time, usually in a different language. And usually how I decide what to study next is just whatever calls to me, whatever I feel like doing, whatever I think is going to be most interesting in that moment. I don't try to force myself too much to do any one particular thing or keep a particular order, because I feel when you force yourself to do it, it takes some of the joy out of it. And as I mentioned before, once you take the joy out of it, you begin to do it less and less. So I really just do whatever I please, and that turns out to be quite a few languages. I have some activities in each language that I enjoy doing, and that helps keep me motivated. So what are those activities? I enjoy reading a lot, so I have books in Japanese, in Spanish, in French, in German, And I learn all these words through reading the books. I use migaku.io, which is a Chrome extension which allows you to auto-create flashcards for Anki for later studying. And the great thing about this is it creates a flashcard with the entire sentence that you found in the book that you're reading. So later when I go through my Anki flashcards, I'm basically rereading the text, but the difference between just opening a book and reading text at random is now I have Anki and I have the algorithm behind which passages are being shown to me through the flashcards. And that's incredibly important for getting the most bang for your buck in terms of memorizing and learning and studying. So something else I like to do is when I'm eating, it's a little bit difficult to read just because I don't have my hands free. I'm usually using my hands to eat. And so what I like to do is I like to watch or listen to podcasts. Actually, one of the viewers suggested to me the Italian podcast, One More Time, which I've been enjoying greatly. And I found actually that I've learned how to speak Italian mostly through just watching One More Time podcast. I haven't done any specific studying of material. I've just kind of watched the One More Time podcast, and I have the subtitles in Italian, and I just watch and listen. And then I'm able to figure out sort of how to speak Italian. And then on Saturdays, we have a session, the students from the Language Academy and we get together and we practice speaking Italian and French together. So that's a good way to kind of cement the knowledge that I've gained over the week. So yeah, something else I enjoy doing, of course, is getting real world practice of the language. I like to meet native speakers of the language and speak to them in it. Right now, I'm meeting a bunch of Mandarin Chinese speakers, and that's always a lot of fun. I also have a friend, Yang Miao, who speaks Teochew, and I get to speak Teochew with her. And so just being able to meet someone face to face in real life and have an actual conversation is so great. It's so great to be able to make a real human connection with someone. And that might be the pinnacle of using my languages for me. So I hope that helps, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I will talk to you again next time. Thank you so much.